On today's video, we are going to tell you our story when it comes to pornography addiction, and how this is going to be helpful to you is if your marriage is struggling with pornography addiction. Maybe you are a wife who's discovered that your husband views it, and so now you have lots of questions like, well, what do I do now? Should I talk to him about it? Should we ignore this? There's lots of things that can go on when you finally, discover that this is an issue. And so we're going to tell our story in hopes of encouraging you, because during this time, it's kind of like you've been, hit by a truck. It's that traumatic. Like, you can't just go on with your day and act like everything's just totally normal and fine and it's not hurting you. When you're hit by something, you actually have to go and receive help for that. And so that's our hope today, is to give you at least a little bit of encouragement to help you begin to move forward towards the healing process and working through pornography addiction. And so I'm Sierra Cook, and this is my husband Canyon Cook, and so we're going to get started with our story.
So really, I'll just give a little bit of feedback on this, is that I was addicted to porn, right? And I started whenever I was a young preteen, maybe, probably 10, 11, 12, something like that. But whenever we got engaged, even before that, I stopped watching porn and stopped masturbating then. And so it was probably a couple months before we actually got engaged.
And when you say stop, you didn't really try anything. So like you just said, well, I'm not going to do it anymore.
I did not actively act out in watching porn or masturbating or searching it. So that's what
right, but to get back to just so they can see where you're at. So when this was originally happening, where he was beginning to, try to come off of pornography, you weren't really doing anything.
Right.
So
I just quit cold turkey.
There was nothing in place. It was all just willpower saying, well, that's it. I can be free from this.
Yep. It was just cold turkey. There were no strategies, no tactics, no anything.
Yeah.
Aside from me just saying I'm not doing it again.
Yes.
Which is really, most men try that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work.
It might sometimes, but
some people it does.
It takes more than that.
Yeah. And so now, and going into that, just there's a video on my YouTube and a podcast where I talk about that and why it doesn't work like that. Mm-hmm. Now we'll continue on. So I didn't act out for a year through our marriage at all. And then our first wedding anniversary came around.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, I don't think it was on my first wedding anniversary. I can't remember the exact day that it was. But anyways, you wanna go from there?
So he relapsed that day. From my perspective of that time, it was like, okay, he told me he was quitting. Well, that's it. There's no other problem then. And I didn't know anything else. I didn't know if there was a battle in the mind going on. I didn't know anything except he said he was going to quit, so I just trust that. So the year went by, and I would check in with him sometimes and say, have you done this? Have you searched anything? And all of that. And he'd be like, no, I haven't done any of that. And so when it was our first year anniversary, we were separated just because my daughter at the time, she had suffered shaken baby syndrome, and from my first marriage, and she was in the hospital overnight. So we were separated for the first time since we had gotten married. It was a very stressful situation, and we had also taken off accountability blockers off of our computers and phones. That's the only thing that we had put in place together as a couple. Yeah. Was we're going to have Covenant Eyes as one of them. And
that was the only one we had at that time.
Okay, so anyway, we put that on our devices. And around this time, when all this was happening, a year into our marriage, we had decided, well, we really don't need that anymore. I think he's good. And so we just let it go and didn't pay for it anymore. And it's not even that expensive. So all of those things, what little we had built up around, like safeguarding him from temptation and stuff like that, we had basically knocked down. So there was no accountability. He was alone for the first time with the computer, with the internet, and we didn't even have any boundaries set, nothing like that. So that was the night that he relapsed. And I guess real quick we can try to get into the details of our discovery day. So discovery day is when, most of the time it's the female who finds out that her spouse has been viewing pornography. And you can find that through him telling you, or you somehow come across it on his phone, someone else tells you, things like that. So for us, our discovery day was that next day after the night of like our first year anniversary when we were separated. So my daughter comes home, and this is not to like bash him and be like, wow, you're a really terrible person, things like that. This is just to share the real side to this and how it really affects people every day in their real lives. And so he comes home. She's placed on hospice care that same day. So again, stressful situation. And so we're at home, and I'm trying to like prepare, like, what do I do now? She's on hospice care. I hadn't discovered his stuff yet, and my phone happened to be dead. So sometimes I think God can set up these little times. So like, not that God wants to harm and that he ever causes anything bad, but I think that he can bring to light what you hide in the dark is brought to the light. And I think that God does that a lot. He's going to bring it to the light because he is married to God's daughter, and he's going to want me to know that these things are going on. Just like, if you've had a discovery day, you might be thinking, yeah, I wasn't even looking for this stuff, and it just kind of came to me. And so that's how it was with us. So I was looking at his phone, or I said, can I use your phone to look up some ideas just to do to her room? Maybe make it calming. I knew she was going to pass away eventually. We didn't know exactly when. So I just wanted to decorate her room. So I get on his phone, start looking at some different ideas, and the algorithm on a few different apps was like showing me lingerie and stuff like that. And I was like, wait, mine doesn't do this. And I'll just get on here. And so it started to click with me, and I was just in shock of like, well, why am I seeing this on here? And I knew he had a past, so I thought, well, maybe it's just brought up from those times where he's still using the same login, and that was something that used to come up on this. And so I approached him about it, and I was like, no, this is not normal. I started digging into some stuff and realized that he had relapsed the night before. So we had this, huge argument, and I like to be real about that. It wasn't just like a little argument. It was like I was in a rage. I was very upset. It's like, like for another metaphor, I guess, I have been shot by him, by the person that I cared the most about, who's supposed to care the most about me. And during the same time that my daughter was on hospice care. And then, you have this person who that's all you want to go to is to him. And so now you're stuck feeling alone, betrayed, scared. The future is unknown. You're really upset. You're in a rage. Like, what do I do? And so that's where I was in that moment. Do you have anything to add to it?
Not to the story, no. I mean, you pretty much said
Okay.
it. But I would definitely say another feeling you can feel is trapped, because you're in that cycle of you don't want to go to me, but I'm the one you want to go to.
Yeah.
So it can feel very lonely in that situation.
Yeah, because you're used to telling he's my best friend, and you're used to telling your best friend everything, and like now you might have some people to go to, but again, the people that you go to, you may already know or be afraid that they're not going to feel the same way that you do about it. So like, as a Christian woman, as a Christian wife, without a doubt that pornography is wrong. It has no place in a marriage, especially a Christian marriage. And not everybody feels that way, especially like with the culture. Just because something is made normal doesn't make it right, but our culture has made this very normal.
Well, and one thing that we realized in this too is that there's a lot of Christian people, whether it be male or female or not, that believe that pornography is actually an okay thing, when the Bible clearly says that it's not.
Yeah. Then people twist the Bible to go with their agenda all the time.
Right.
And this is nothing different than everything else they do.
And with culture, I mean, you have the thought of, it's what men do, or at least he told you, that kind of thing as well. And so it doesn't really help the woman in her thought of, I was just betrayed, but
I can't share my hurt with anyone. Knowing,
Right.
People will minimize my hurt,
I
my
mean,
pain.
and even some pastors, they do the same thing. And so even though they
Or
know
they
the
focus
word,
only on the man.
yeah,
And the
they
woman's
don't
just kind of like, okay,
they don't help the woman or stuff like that. And so that's where it becomes a really big struggle trying to find other people who feel the same way as you do, who can actually help you. Because there's that too, and that a lot of counseling, a lot of pastoral counseling, that the help that's given doesn't necessarily fight the battle that's being fought on all sides. It might fight the spiritual battle, but it might not fight the mental battle.
And it's not just a battle that he has to do.
Yeah.
It's also us as the wife, as the one who's been betrayed. Now we have all this new trauma, in which if you've had trauma in your past, it could even bring up that trauma. And so now you are left to deal with all of that one way or another. And so, just moving on with our story. So we went through that, and really I kind of felt like I had to put it on pause because my daughter was dying, and she was on hospice care for 2 weeks after that before she actually passed away. So the situation might be a little different than yours, the situation that you're in, but I felt like I had to put that on pause. And maybe looking back, that may not be the best decision, just because, just working through so much trauma all at once and then just kind of pushing that trauma to the side, and it wasn't the best thing to do. But it's the only way I knew how to survive with the tools that I had at the time and the information that I had, because up to that point we had never looked in to what actually, like, pornography addiction actually is, and how to cope with it, how any information for the woman who's going through that, what betrayal trauma is. I didn't know any of those things at that time. And so after my daughter passed away and I had time to look back and be like, what do we need to do differently? Because if you've tried this before and it just keeps failing, or he keeps relapsing, it's not that it can't ever change. It's that maybe you just don't have the right information. Maybe you don't have the tools that's actually needed. And because, again, everybody's just telling you, well, just get over it, just stop. And the way the brain works with this stuff, we had to go through that learning process of how it actually affects the brain. And I had to accept that it wasn't me. It's nothing that I was doing. It's not who I am. And it's not what I look like. And
it's not what you weren't doing. Because there's a big concept that, essentially, she must not be giving him what he needs.
Yeah.
So he goes to go find it somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the case with porn, okay? Mm-hmm. That's not how it works. That's not how the mind works. That's not why men go back to it. It has nothing to do with the wife at all.
Yeah.
Okay? So, and we had to go through that process because in the beginning, she thought it was her. She thought it was, what she looked like, what she did, all kinds of things.
You turn, when you're looking at something from a view, it's like, well, maybe if I had done this and this and this, then he wouldn't have done that. But,
right.
It's all, once you understand the way the brain works with this is not just, something that is, it's very complex because you have trained your brain in a certain way for years and years and years, and you can't just switch it off like it never happened, like you had never been watching pornography. And so, especially with such a connection, a sexual connection, God created that to be between man and wife only. And so when someone's bringing something else in, then God didn't design it that way. And so your brain doesn't work that way. So you have rewired your brain to a different way than God created it. And now you're going to start a process of rewiring it back to the way God created it to be.
Yeah.
And so that's what we were learning through that time of like, wow, it seemed overwhelming. It was like, why does no one tell us this information? We've never learned this. Parents aren't teaching us this.
Church doesn't.
All
really
we ever
teach
heard
it.
kind of growing up was, well, you shouldn't do that. Or, that's just boys will be boys. And it seems like people just accept that. Like, parents just accept that their boys are going to do that. And that's not how it works. That's not how, God designed that to be.
Well, and there's a big problem, too, that there's the concept boys will be boys. And so they continue this behavior up until they get married. And then there's the thought of, oh, well, I'll stop whenever I get married.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. Like you said, you've trained your brain and your body to do things for, years upon years, decades, potentially. And it's kind of like you wake up every day at 6 a.m. You can't just stop waking up every day at 6 a.m.
Yeah. So
yeah.
The whole point is that, what point were we making there? So we're turning it around to...
You're rewiring the brain. You have to work on that. It takes some effort. You
Yes.
can't just quit cold turkey. Some people can, but it is very few and far between.
So back to our story. That's where we were learning that.
Yeah.
So that I'm trying to stay on track with our story here. So we were learning all this new information. Felt overwhelming. You may be in that position where you're feeling overwhelmed, and it just seems like this is going to be such a difficult thing to do. And I can tell you it's difficult whether you do the work or you don't. It's going to be difficult either way. And so you might as well do the good work to get through it and to stick together and to better your marriage and better future generations to come by doing the actual work. And so that's what we began to do. And since then, that was 3 years ago. So he's been free from, pornography addiction for, it's 3 years, right?
Yeah, a little
3
bit
years.
over, yeah.
And throughout that time, we've done work. We still do work. We still learn things. We still, we're taking trainings on how to help other people through it. And so, it's a learning process. But we are here to say that you can absolutely do it. Yeah. Back then, when that first happened, I would have been like, I'm going to have to live with this the rest of my life. And I'm always going to have to worry about what he's looking at on his phone. I'm always going to have to worry about if he's checking that person out. And I'm never going to feel peace. And so that's how I felt at the beginning. But after working through all these things, after getting more tools, getting more education, it doesn't feel that way anymore. And he's been able to go through healing too, because he felt hopeless at a time where he was like, can I really be fixed from this? Can I really let go of this? Is this really going to be my life forever, where I'm just an addict to this? I cannot quit it completely. And he wanted to. He deeply desired to. He showed remorse for it, and he wanted to quit it. It wasn't like something where he was like, well, I want this, so I'll just tell her I'm going to quit, and I'm just going to keep doing this. That's not how it was. He really wanted to. And so, it goes both ways with, it can feel kind of hopeless in the beginning, especially if you're having trouble with relapsing. But there is hope. We're proof here that you can get through it. You can work through it with God. And we're here to give you those tools, the strategies that we've used. We're here to teach you those things so that you can overcome this and heal from it and work towards, reconciliation. How do you say
reconciliation?
That? Yeah, reconciliation. Yeah. And to have a marriage that was better than before, because you learned how to communicate clearly. You learned how to set good boundaries and all those healthy things that were also not necessarily taught going into marriage. And so there are good things that can come from this, even though it doesn't feel that way at all. But your future self will look back to this moment and be like, that was when I decided to make this change. And I decided that we were going to go for it no matter what it took. We were going to put in the work, and we were going to stick together, even through those really hard times.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I mean, I would definitely say, too, that the two biggest things that go into helping a guy overcome pornography addiction is, one, the willingness to stop it. Two, it's the wife sticking by the husband's side.
Yeah.
And so with that, we also created a little guide to help you guys. It's the top 5 ways to rescue your marriage from porn. And it just goes down the list of things that will definitely impact your fight against porn and what it does to your marriage.
Yeah, and we'll post a link for that. And also you can go to renewed-marriage.com, and then you'll find it there too. And then just a few other resources that we have for you. We have created a boundaries and consequences course, and so it's easy to access. It's easy to go through at your own pace and set those boundaries and consequences, because that's one of the first things that we did to start moving forward and to actually take some action on overcoming this, compared to just sitting around like, well, what do we do now? And we wanted to give you something that you could actually sit down and do together and actually make a difference in this. And so we're going to wrap this up, because this was a long video, but there's more to come. We're going to be posting more to these channels. We're going to be talking more about this, and so please reach out to us if you have any questions.
If you have any questions, email us at info@renewed-marriage.com.
Yep.
Yep.
See ya.